This episode of the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast has been brought to you by our sponsors at Sweet Cheetah Publicity. Sweet Cheetah is a PR collective that values people over profit. They put a different spin on public relations by working primarily with friends and using all profits to aid charitable organizations. With a roster that includes Jawbox, The New Amsterdams, Brainiac, Get Some, Funeral Date, Damien Dunn, and many more artists, record labels, and podcasts. Sweet Cheetah. That's a great PR cohort. You can find them on social media by simply searching Sweet Cheetah PR, and they'll be there. He's been Tim. I've been Peter, and Sweet Cheetah has been beautiful.
If I'm the curse to win this, I would. If I could to win this, I would.
And I would. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. I'm your host, Peter. I am still here. And tonight, I have Mike Thorn. Mike was the coordinator of Maximum Rock and Roll. He was in a bevy of bands, including Architects of the New Christ Rebellion, Inept, Kill the Man Who Questions, Stockholm Syndrome, and War All the Time. More importantly, and more recently, Mike publishes Razorblades and Aspirin fanzine. It is a fine art photography-based fanzine, the subject of which musicians, artists, people at shows, beautiful photos of hardcore and punk shows. Talk about elevating the form. There's no zine quite like it, and quite honestly, it is something to behold, truly. If you've never seen a copy of Razorblades and Aspirin, do yourself a huge favor. Seek it out. It comes in all different formats. Sometimes it's newsprint, sometimes it's in a spiral-bound book, full color. You never know what's coming next with Mike. Tonight we talk about that. We talk about his past in punk and hardcore, his take on the next generation of hardcore kids, which is refreshingly positive, and I applaud that. We get into all of the territory you would expect and a lot that you absolutely would not. I hope you're enjoying the show. Please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow me on social media. Share my stuff. If you love what I do, I would appreciate all of your help. In lieu of using music from another artist tonight, I have chosen to showcase some songs from my band's last album, which is a few years old at this point right now, a Hard Out album called The Thirst. It is available to purchase physically, stream, what have you, on our Bandcamp. If you are interested and you cannot find it, it is in my link tree on Instagram. Without further ado, I give to you Mike Thorn of Razorblades and Aspirin on the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast.
Slice
Hello, Michael.
How's it going, man?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing all right. Do my headphones sound okay?
Yeah, you sound all right.
Okay, good. I'm always worried because they're not shitty. They're the iPod Pros, but there's some days when they sound better than others. So,
Well, I hadn't expected you to have like an entire studio set up because you don't do this 3 to 4 times a week like I do. So I'm prepared.
It's funny because I actually so my job is I am the global director of webcasting services for a company. So I kind of do this all day long.
Okay.
But I prefer to see, because I'm also cheap and they won't let me expense it. I prefer to see these episodes. So there's a lot of calls I get on. I go, do I sound okay? Is this?
Yeah. I mean, I don't expect people to be, studio quality.
Yeah.
It's not feasible for the average punk musician. So it is what it is, man. But yeah. I have to tell you, I've kind of been aware of you since the 90s, pretty much, because you were in Kill the Man Who Questions.
I was
Yeah.
the Kill Man. I'm the one of 50 different guitar players or whatever it is. But and I'm the one who I think I have played more shows with Kill the Man than anybody else, but I never recorded on any records.
Right. Yeah.
So because I did a Euro tour and I did a US tour and a bunch of other shows. So
yeah, and that's kind of like where I first became like aware of you, and then of course Maximum Rock and Roll is a big part of that as well. But you have a life kind of entrenched in our thing. You know what I mean? Like you like myself, hardcore became kind of like your life. And not in a way like we're waving a flag in a song. It's really like a part of your not just culture, but the way you move throughout life. So that it supersedes culture and it becomes not just a lifestyle, but an MO. Like it's a real tangible part of the way you move. What was it about like our thing that like I'm Justin from the Locust. We established this thing where there's an us thing. Okay, like where if you come from this thing, you're part, especially in our age group, you're part of us. And it's not just a sound or a style or the way we dress, or it's just it's its own spiritual vibe. What was it that kind of like drew you to that part of what it is to be us?
A lot of things, really. I mean, I think my joke answer would be society, man.
Right.
And then I would offer to go get, do crimes like get sushi and not pay. But for me, I mean, in some ways I'm joking with something that I'm not, right? Like I got into like punk early. Like I got my first like mixtapes and was hanging around like people into punk in like 86.
Yeah.
And like my first show was early 88. But then there was like opportunities. In 88 I was 14 and but like there was opportunities even before then. Like I had, and I think it was just like I didn't fit in with like as a kid being like 12 years old with like sports culture, like that kind of thing. I wasn't a popular kid. I was kind of a weird kid. I was fascinated. And I think for a lot of it too, I wrote about this briefly in an issue of my zine. Like even before I was actually like into punk, I was like aware of it as a thing, right?
Yeah.
Because you couldn't help it. Like in the 80s, it was like, it was after school specials. It was like in the Chipmunks. It was, in Silver Spoons. There's all these kind of places. And so you're kind of aware about it. And so like, there's part of me that like, I was interested in because it was like, these people seemed cool.
Yeah.
and they did stuff because they wanted to do stuff, and not, you know, and I think when I was 12 years old, like I was looking to be cool,
Yeah.
right? And so, and I didn't fit in sports wise, like, you know, like I didn't fit into that kind of thing, and so I just kind of like stumbled my way into it in a lot of ways. And I think what the longevity of the thing is it enabled me to make connections with other people, you know.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is like I spent a majority of my like kind of pre-college, really, to be honest, like spending most of my punk existence just mail ordering records and like
Yeah.
writing to people, and like, and that idea, like the notion that I could just like stuff like $20 in an envelope and get like 10 7 inches, you know, sent to me from New Jersey or wherever. It was just cool. It was like an interesting thing. Like, it's one of those things that still kind of translates. Like my PO box is fascinated by me, right? Like people at my post office, because they're like, you get all this stuff from like, you know, random places in Eastern Europe and then Southeast Asia, and like, and they're like, normal people don't do that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was the thing for me. It's like this ability to make connections with people who have similar feelings about the world, who have a similar sense of being disaffected. And it's also just like for me, like I'm a very much a person who like splits what is punk into two categories in my brain. There's all the stuff that's like punk, and I use that term in like a broad sensibility, right?
Yeah.
And then here's the stuff I actually like musically, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that I think is punk, I think is great, like conceptually, but like I was like, I don't get that shit. Like it's
Yeah.
dumb. Like, because if you talk about music, it's like I just want everything to sound like crossed out.
Yeah. Of
Like,
course. Yeah. Yeah.
that's it. You know, it's like I just want like maximum speed, maximum destruction. But it's also funny because at the same time, I'm a total pop fiend.
Yeah.
Like, so that's kind of like this weird, but like that's the thing is. So I think that's the thing though, is like it's this sense of connection, right? And and like meeting people globally, and it's, you know, it's that's been a thing for me like since I was a kid, and the reason why I still come around. Like I still feel that thing. Like I'm in a room, and it's like it's this weird like metaphysical hippie shit where I'm like, you feel that transition of energy between the crowd and the audience, and there's no separation.
Yeah.
And like it's just like, I don't know, it's like everybody drop acid and make love, man. Like whatever.
It's not that different, because I can tell you I came to punk in an almost very hippie way, because having been raised by mom who was a hippie, dad who was in the Vietnam War, uncle who was in the Vietnam War, but both became hippies thereafter. I got to see the Clash open up for the Who because of these
Wow.
people when I was a fucking younger. Shea
Mhm.
Stadium, you know, Combat Rock,
Yeah.
having gotten to see this, and you know, I didn't even know it was. I knew it was different. I knew it was punk, but
Yeah.
like I knew it moved me. I knew the energy was perfect and alive and palpable, and felt like I could attain it. But
Yeah.
you know, I just loved it on a musical spectrum. It didn't become real to me until I probably like around that age group. Still, I found the tape trade.
Yeah.
And the tape trade got me into, like, you know, being pen pals with people from Taiwan, people from favelas in Brazil, like just everywhere. As
Yeah.
long as
No,
they
it's
had something to offer and I had something to offer them, and it was simple. Like the transaction was just, I have something cool. Do you have
yeah.
something cool? Okay, let's do this. And you built relationships on that. That to me is the essence.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing because it's like the tape thing was a big deal for me. Like,
Yeah.
because that's how you would hear, because a lot of this stuff, like at one point I amassed a crazy record collection, right?
Mhm.
But like that crazy record collection is predated by, like, I didn't know how to get like a Wretched or an Indigesty record, you know,
Yeah.
but I had heard all that stuff. Like I knew I had heard Antidote, like I had heard all these Killed by Death things even before the Killed by Death records came out,
Yeah.
because people had that thing and they put it on a tape because it's a funny song or it's like whatever, you
Yeah.
know. And uh, and even like when I got into like actually buying records and swapping records, even that was a way to make connections, because like my version of record trading or record collecting was I'd send you a list, you send me a list, and we just send boxes to each other randomly.
Yeah.
Like, I found these records you wanted, and then I get this box from Poland, and they're like, here's all the cool stuff from Poland you've never heard before.
Mm-hmm.
And they were looking for, like, I don't know, like Megadeth records or something. But, like, that was the thing. And so, like, building those connections, I think, is really it's important to me. And it's actually really funny because I go to shows now. I'm still someone who, like, I go to shows like all the fucking time. But, like, there are moments where I'm like, this band's really good, but there's not that transitory property of, like, exchange of energy where I'm just like, it's not that great of a show. This band's really good, but, like, whatever. Like, I don't really care. And I'll just, like, walk out. I do that all the time.
I do too, because, and it's not a slight to the band per se, but to me, and I'm not shitting on what they're doing now, the kids are doing now, because I think it's as important, if not more important, than what we had been doing. It just doesn't seem like there's that same amount of recognition of counterpoint in others. When we used to walk around the mall in the 80s, for example, if you saw another dude in a Sam Hain t-shirt, you were like, yo, you're one of mine. And if you walked up to that dude and said, yo, fucking Initium, bro, it was a thing. It was a real, like, it was an exchange of emotional and spiritual energy where, like, yes, it's us, we're them. That doesn't fucking exist anymore in any kind of tangible way.
I disagree.
You disagree? Okay, well,
I totally disagree.
Okay.
So, I think it doesn't happen the same way that would happen as someone who is, like, approaching 50, right?
Okay.
Like that I remember it happening. I think that there's an aspect of this, and I had it like Scal stayed at my house recently, and we had this conversation where I was just like, we were talking about, like, Turnstile and shit like that. Yeah. And I was just like, I think Turnstile is a fine version of Lady Bad Brains.
Yeah, they are.
But it doesn't do anything for me. But it's not for me. And I think that's the big thing where, like, I think it's hard for people our age to recognize that there's people who are like 19, 20, 15, whatever, who are making those same kind of connections. They're seeing someone in a gel t-shirt and they're making that connection, right? I think that, and I think it's, and I see it, and I think part of it is I see it because I do my best, and it is not to shit on older people at all. Like, I totally get it, because, like, my partner doesn't want to go to shows all the time, but, like, I go to shows, house shows. I go to like all the time, and I'm there as an observer, and I see it, and I think about this a lot. When, like, I interviewed Gel for Razorblades, like, they talk about this, like, hardcore for the freaks, right? This notion of, like, because that's what you and I were when we were kids, right?
Very much so, yeah.
It's fucking weirdos, and we would see other weirdos, and we gravitate to other weirdos, and that's the same kind of thing. There is a cool guy thing that happens, and it happens with younger kids, and it happened back then. Like, I hated all the people in Doghouse because they were cool guys, like Majority One and Transcend and all those guys. Like, they were, like, cool, but like, not in the way that I meant could be cool. Like, they were like dudes who hung out with, like, popular girls, that kind of thing. Like, because they had money, they were attractive, conventionally speaking, and, like, so I didn't really connect with them, is what I'm kind of getting at. And I think that same thing happens now. Like, there's kids here who are total fucking maniac weirdo kids, and they find their connections and meanings in this. And I think some of the things that happen as we get older, we don't see that as often, because it's not, in some ways, it's not for us,
Yeah, no, but it's youth culture. We're not young, so yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Well, I'm only 30 years old, so.
Me too, brother.
That's something I like to tell kids. That's my running joke, is that when I feel really old, I'm just like, I'm 30. So no, but it is a thing. I think it's a common feeling for people of a certain age, like pushing 40, over 40, to be like, well, it's just not the same as it was. You used to see someone DMs, and you're like, oh, I'm Doc Martin. It's like, you're into the same thing I am. And I think those signifiers are different. And I think but they're the same. They're just, we don't recognize them the same way, right?
Because we're not there.
We're not there. We're not in that place in our lives.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I got a mortgage.
Yeah,
You know?
we're both like, I'm almost 50, you know,
Mhm.
I don't see it the same way. Like I see a kid in a minor threat t-shirt, and there's still that young part of me that wants to be like, dude, minor
Yeah.
threat. And I realize that he's gonna look at me and be like, yo, you old fuck. Like I don't care if you like Ian MacKaye. But like there was in the 80s, if had I run up to another dude who was into Fugazi, or like they would have been like, yeah,
Yeah.
you, I know you, but they're probably doing that with Gel. They're probably
Yeah.
doing that with all of these new bands.
Well, it's a funny thing because in my brain, it's like if I see a kid who's 20 years old, 19 years old, and they're wearing a Minor Threat t-shirt, I'm like, why do you like Minor Threat? That would be the equivalent of me in 1986 being into like, I don't know, something from 1946.
But
You know,
I would have been
I mean,
something into something like that.
I like that stuff. I mean, the thing is, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I love like early rock and roll. I love, you know, all that kind of stuff. But like, but what the point is like, where do you find the connection in that? Right? Like,
Yeah.
to me, if I'm 20 years old, I'm into Gel. I'm into Scowl.
Yeah.
I'm into Reckoning Force. I'm into all these bands like that because they're closer to me in age. They're closer to me and, you know, all that kind of, and the connections. And, you know, and I vibe with all this other stuff. For me, it's just like, you know, and I think sometimes it's hard for, we'll say, other men my age, like and people and myself, to kind of get that, you
Yeah.
know, like, and it's also like weird because like I'm super into all this stuff, but I'm an old ass man.
I know, but like I think
Just
Zulu is one of the,
sometimes.
like I listen to bands like Zulu and Gel,
Yeah,
and I get really fucking excited for them. And
outstanding.
Damien Moyal comes on my show a lot, and Damien and I love that dude. He loves
Yeah.
all this shit too, but it's that same kind of disconnect where it's like, yeah, dude, I love it, but it's not really mine anymore. And there's a reckoning in that. You know, we can accept that, yes, we're from this and it is, you know, our past, and we still resonate with it. We still pay into it in our way,
Mhm.
but it's not our game anymore.
Yeah.
And but we
It's just,
but I'm still doing a podcast. You're still doing a fucking awesome fanzine. Like we're still a viable mechanism in the machine that is the greater hardcore punk thing. It's I think it comes from not a different place, but a different perspective now for us. Like, am I right?
yeah, I mean, my thing is like the operative word in what I do is fan zine, right? Like it's
Yeah.
giant fan look. And it's because like I'm still into this stuff. And it's why like my zine covers this stuff, but it's also like a recognition of like I'm legit like excited about seeing these bands. Like
Yeah.
legit excited about, you know, going to shows and seeing what young kids are up to. Because like I'm one who very much, when I say all ages, I mean all ages,
Yeah.
right? I hate the old band version of me will go to bar shows, but there was a version of me that wouldn't go to a 21 and up show.
No, me
Like I
neither.
wouldn't do it.
Me neither. It's
Like I
bullshit.
was like absolutely not. And but I also realized that there can be a time for that. And so but like legit, it's part of what I do. Why I do what I do is because I still want to participate in the thing, and I still want to. And it's part of the reason why, like, if you read through my zine, like, I've gotten complaints about this. Like, you're not critical when you do record reviews. And it's just like, well, for one thing, it's like I can bash a bunch of stuff. It's fun to write reviews trashing things,
Yeah.
but I'd rather talk about like the things I'm into. It's more interesting.
That's why that's the impetus of this show. I only talk to people who I like, who create things that I'm a fan of and enjoy, because what am I going to do? Am I going to sit here and talk to someone who I'm lukewarm about and just, you
Yeah,
know, spit into the ether? There's no love in it. So like it's devoid of passion. Why bother? Why bother?
yeah. Well, it's also a thing for me too. It's like I've never gotten like why people like I get why there's like a litany of psychological studies of like being defined at a certain age and why that resonates with you more than other things and blah blah blah. But I've never understood like people who are like I don't want to be boring. Is basically what it boils down to. Is like
Yeah.
it's really boring to me to be like, oh, I'm just gonna sit around and listen to the things I was into when I was like 16 or 18 or whatever at
Yeah.
peak year was. Like um like I'd rather, and I don't care that this sounds derivative of something else. Like if it's got its own spin on it, then like, you know, Youth of Today owes everything they did to like Austin.
Yeah.
Like Coke wrote a song about it.
Yeah.
But like but at the same time, it's like people still they'll value that in its moment, just like how I valued, Born Against, and then I valued like Talk Is Poison, even though they were taking what was before and growing on it. And so for me, it's like I want to like I don't think I view like music as a continuum,
Yeah.
and I want to continue to learn about the new thing and what they're doing to the old thing, and then like morphing into their own thing, right? Like that's what's interesting to me. Like I don't get, and that's the thing is I don't get like why you would just be like, oh well, music died for me when I was 30. Now I have a job.
Yeah. That's sad.
Yeah,
I can't live that life. If you look behind me, I have an entire I have over 7,000 records that will tell you that I'm a fan from stem to stern. I started to lie about the fact oh, I'm on free lunch, and no one checked back then. So I would take my lunch money every day, and I would go to the alternative tentacles. I would get my inserts from alternative tentacles right like around age 10 and save my lunch money and buy fucking records with my lunch money.
yeah,
And shit would be coming in the mail, and my father would be like, what did you buy? Like, where did you get the money from this? Oh,
yeah,
yeah, Dad, like he knew I was a scam artist. I'm his oldest son. He's a scam artist. So, like, yeah,
yeah.
but
That's funny.
you do what you have to do to attain the things that matter to you, especially at that age. It's not like I could go out and get a job.
Yeah, yeah,
You had to be 12 to be a paper boy, and at age 12, I
yeah,
did become a paper boy to buy records,
yeah,
only records.
yeah,
But that has been like I'm a seeker. I'm by nature, I'm a seeker. I buy books, I buy records. I buy books, I buy records, and that's it. And it's always been about like what's next for me.
yeah,
I'm,
yeah. And
you know,
that's
I'm approaching 50. I'm still trying to find what's next, and I'm enjoying the ride. I don't feel disappointed. Whatever new comes down the line, especially in our little subset of the world, I find something to love because you'll never be disappointed if you are allowing yourself to enjoy the journey.
yeah. Well, that's the thing now, and I think too. Now it's easier than it used to be.
Oh yeah,
To be honest, now you can just be like, oh, like my friend Bobby from Spinal Conflict here jokes with me because he's like, so what's on your spreadsheet now? Like I keep because that's how I roll. I have spreadsheets and things, but like I keep spreadsheets of like, here's all the new releases and demos and things like that. And like when I see it, so and a lot of that stuff is it pops up, someone mentions it online, it's a chat group, it's whatever, and I throw it on a spreadsheet and do it later. And you can find a lot of stuff in that way. And it's that continual journey of trying to find like, I'm convinced that every band has one good song, like
yeah,
across the board.
yeah,
Like they may only have one, but and I want to find it. That's the things I want to hear it, right? And it's that mentality that kind of I think in some ways kind of drove a lot of those 80s comps
yeah. Oh
where
yeah,
it's just like because you find in some of the 80s comps you'll see the same song in a bunch of comps, and it's because like, well, that's their only good song.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you find out after the fact, but like it's the same thing that drove those Still by Death comps because a lot of it's like it's one great song and then everything else is shit. And so that's kind of how my brain works. Where I'm just like, well, I want to hear the good thing they did,
yeah,
because I feel like that's the thing is like everybody has that in them, and it just and they met they made and I feel that with like going to see bands like I'm going to go see a band and they may never record their good song, but I might hear it.
Yeah.
You know, as crazy as that seems, like,
Well, no,
which is why I
because
go out all the time.
well, how many bands have you seen throughout your entire life in music, and they were always amazing live, but it never came across on tape? I could name dozens of bands like that,
Yeah,
legitimately
there's lots of them.
dozens.
And there's lots of bands that became very big, and like I listen to the records and I'm like, this is shit.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
were so good live, and like, this is such shit. Like, why did you put so much marshmallow all over this? Like, it's so bad. And then the live, they were like, lightning in a bottle.
The band who was not like that for me in that early 90s, like straight edge movement, was Chokehold. To me, they were one of the few that, when they, as intense as they were live, they were just as great on a shitty recording, and all their
Yes.
recordings were shitty. Oh man, but they like
Yes.
there was something about Chokehold, right?
I really
think so.
like Chokehold, and it's funny because I remember having conversations with people about Chokehold and comparing them to Disclose,
Yeah.
and like basically, especially the second LP, where it just sounds like a wall, a Phil Spector-esque wall of distortion,
Yeah.
where you can barely discern what's going on, and it just sounds like some angry Canadian yelling,
And
and
it's all one
just
track. That
it's one
second record,
track.
yeah, Content with Dying was all one track.
I think that may have been a Biden. He was probably like, hey, mastering guy, instead of separating, if you can't separate it out, maybe if I give you some Kinko's cards. So, I don't have money.
Scott Biden could do something like that. I know Scott well. He would have done that.
I once mail ordered a copy of the Groundwork LP for distro. I said, and he sent me a Kinko's card, a Kinko's card, the records, and a master, the photocopy of a cover.
Oh my!
Said, make your own covers. And I was like, how the fuck am I supposed to sell this?
Scott will never change, but
No, I'm sure he's doing it somewhere right now. So
still in Philly, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's the only reason why I use this era as a touchstone is because I'm so versed in it. And there are, you're right, very many incredible, notable bands working today. It's just, I don't have the authority to speak to them quite as well. And it seems to me like the older I get, the more I almost kind of revert more toward bands that are more post-punk-esque, because that's like, before I was into punk and hardcore, I was into The Cure, and I was into the Smiths, and I was into all of that stuff. And there is a scene for that now as well. But I think what's great about right now too is there's a scene for just about everything.
Yeah.
There's power violence again, like in a very peculiar way. But like you were in bands that used elements of power violence to their advantage pretty liberally.
Yeah. I mean, Inept wanted to be basically Crosstop meets Chain String.
Yeah. And
that was the goal. And
well, no, but like there was definitely a nardcore element to what you guys did. That there's no question. Like the nardcore was there. For the uninitiated, nardcore is all hardcore from Oxnard, but that means so many different things. And I think the best example of like that whole era was Infest.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you want to talk about power violence, Infest were kind of the beginning of that.
I think in some ways, yeah. I mean, it's for me. Like I'm one of those people who would be like, and this is based on just, it's partially joking, but based on being friends with some of those people, like there's only like a handful of actual power violence bands. It's like Mazbaster, Crossed Out, Infest, Capitalist Casualties, and Spaz, and No Comment.
Yeah.
And that's it. And to me, it's like, I think, you know, you can, it's all that, but, and then Power Balance really was like that, for me, it was that thing of, I remember talking to Jeff from Capitalist one time about like, they did this band and they just want to be like DRI.
Yeah.
Like first 7-inch DRI. And in the time in the Bay Area, the popular thing was like everyone wanted to be like Primus or like Faith No More. And like they were like, we're not into funk. Like we want to be like, we're a hardcore band. And so there was like this kind of return to form, you know. And then if you talk about like Enfest for sure, like Enfest, like the first time I heard Enfest, it's a lot of those bands. It's funny because like I think about this, like you're talking about like combat rock era, the Clash. Like I heard that when I was a kid, and I was like, "This is punk," and I was like, "How is this?" Like, I mean, this is I enjoy Rock the Casbah,
Yeah,
but like
but it's
how
not
is this,
Jenny
like,
Jones.
and it's not fucking like Infest Slave.
No, no.
Like, and the thing was just like this is like the first time I heard what I expected punk to sound like was when I got the Crossed Out Man as a Bastard Split.
Yeah.
And I heard the Crossed Outside, and I was like, oh, this is punk. This is actually what punk sounds like. Because it's like just completely fucking insane.
Yeah.
Like speed, and then also the ability to slow the fuck down, and the level of just like pure, like unadulterated venom and rage. Like, and then that took me on this journey of like, okay, Ottawa split with Jihad.
Oh,
That
the
took me on this
Ottawa
journey.
Jihad split is fucking like godly.
I love the people in Jihad to death, but has anyone actually ever listened to the Jihad side? I don't think so.
No, it's the Ottawa side that we all get off on.
That's the side that was worn out, and then
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is fine.
Yeah. It's the Ottawa side.
And I said it like Derek, the guitar player, Derek's one of my best friends, and I say that like that, but like, and then I think about this other stuff like that because for me, like, and I like Infest for sure, man, like Slay and then even more so when they released No Man's Slave,
Yeah.
like the second LP, which was sitting in the can forever. Just Joe never recorded the vocals because he was in jail.
Yeah.
Like when they released that in the early odds, I was just like, what the fuck?
Yeah, like where was this?
So relentless. Because the thing is, the Slave has a recording that's kind of, it's muddy and it works. But the second LP, and it's like it's just fucking on. Like if that record had come out like
when it was supposed to,
yeah, like it would just like what fuck. And that's the thing is like all those kind of bands. That's the stuff that got me off. Like it's just like play at 1,000 miles an hour, like have actual songs, and just destroy everything. And I like Infest so much so that they started doing reunions in like 2012, 11, something like that. And I refused to go see them because I didn't want to destroy my brain.
I've done shit like that. I've done
like
shit
I didn't
like
see them until the first time I saw them was they did that like Athena, who used to do 6 Weeks, is working on a documentary about power violence, and they did a show that was like the Power Violence Forever weekend to raise money to help do this film. And that was the first time I saw Infest. And it was like 2016, 2017. And it was just unreal. Like I couldn't believe that I didn't go see those other shows because I had this thing where, because it was just like so tight. It was so fast. And like Joe is a fucking maniac. And so from that point on, I was hooked. And like I saw them in Stockholm. I saw them in Los Angeles. It just just fucking everything set on destroy. And just like, and it was perfect. And like, there's a video of them playing in I think Malaysia that like if you haven't watched it, like it's just absolutely insane because these kids are losing their shit. And that's the thing too is like I think about that when we're talking about from the very beginning of this conversation, like that ability for music to communicate that's connection that you have. And like it's these kids in Malaysia and like they're seeing Infest play and just losing their goddamn minds. And And like Infest isn't like 100% tight. It's just, but there's that feeling.
Yeah.
It's hard to communicate that feeling, you know. And that was the thing. Is like when we first started Inept. I mean, we joked about the crossed out meets chain strengthening, but like Infest was a big deal to us, like as far as a band, you know. And I remember like Capitalist Casualties was a big deal to us, and I remember we got to play with Capitalist in Detroit when they toured the Hell Nation, and like those bands were just like just because that was the thing. Is I remember I spent most of the '90s looking for bands that played hardcore.
Yeah.
Because I kept buying records. And I'm like, oh, this is shit metal, or this is just like art punk, or like whatever. Like I was looking for like, and I would stumble across these things. I'm like, oh well, here's a cop out single, here's a Crudo single, here's Failure Phase. Like it felt like, you know, legit explorer looking for like gems amongst the sea of shit.
Yeah.
Because like I mean, so we were talking about earlier. Like I see value in all this stuff. And someone posted a thing, like I organized More Than Music Fest in '97, and like posted the poster of it, and like I worked my ass off, put that on. But half of those bands I could give a shit about.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm being honest.
No, but
like,
you're just doing it. You're curating for everyone else.
The culture.
Yeah.
For the culture.
Yeah.
And like, but like, if you're gonna talk about like tastes, it's just like I want to see Cop Out. I want to see, you know, I want to see Failure Face.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I want to see, you know, I want to see Gordon Sully Motherfuckers. Like, I want to see that kind of thing. Like, I want to see Loud Fast Rules, basically. You know,
like if you could get Three-Way come to the United States, we'll get them. Yeah. Like that kind of shit.
Yeah. Like I drove to see Gauze, and when they toured in like 96, 97 in Chicago, and got there just in time to see them finish.
I was at that show. Because
really?
I would have given my left fucking arm to see Gauze at that time. So I went. Yeah, absolutely.
We drove from Columbus to that show, and we got there just as everything finished. Like people were walking out.
I drove from Pennsylvania the day before.
Yeah.
And so we camped out.
Yeah.
But there's
those Cleveland dudes all rolling out, and I was like, oh, hey. And they were like, it's over. And I'm like,
there was that whole Clevo thing too, like where like those guys were into the craziest shit for a time. And it could have been the whole integrity of it all, which I loved integrity at that time, but there was also like as much as the intensity was celebrated, I remember going to Massachusetts to the New Bedford Fest, and it was like 95, and the Cleveland dudes just taking things to such an extent where Lifetime was playing, and it was in a YWCA, and they were diving off of the second level, and one kid got his neck broken during a fucking Hello Bastards era Lifetime set.
Yeah.
Like that was the shit that kind of ruined it for me, right? Like as much as it was like
all those Cleveland dudes, and I love a lot of them. And like some of them are really great friends of mine, but they're fucking maniacs.
Yeah. The Cleveland Death Squad.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, all that stuff, like, you know, even, I mean, it's wild to me because those dudes were into Japanese hardcore before it was a thing.
Yeah, they were.
You know, it's like when I interviewed Dwight, he was talking about like, he was like, yeah, if you go online and the Zuo 7-inch that was like bootlegged 1,000 times, there's a skip in the bootleg. He's like, well, that's my record. Someone bootlegged my record, my copy, you know? And I remember like, and then talking to like, you know, like Wedge lived in Japan for a while, you know, and those guys were like early on, like, you know, Urba is like fucking encyclopedia of music in general. Like if you want to talk, and the same thing with Wedge, you want to talk like soul from Toledo, Ohio in 1969. Wedge has half the records, you know, like, but he also has every ADK like Flexi, you know, it's like, he knows it all, you know, and like, and the same thing with Urba, like, like those guys are just like, it's because I had a good radio.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. It's like, you could, and that was some of my early punk development is like, I had good radio, you know, like Toledo and Bowling Green had good radio. I could pick up the station from Cleveland. You could hear in 1990 and 1989, you would hear these songs or these records from these bands, and those dudes do all that stuff. So, and they're just as interested in like, a bunch of KB death stuff as they are in like a bunch of like Japanese thrash, as they're into like a bunch of like soul music from the 60s, like obscure stuff, and like they're just vacuums of that kind of stuff, and then they were also, and then like Wedge would be like, yeah, like I was hanging around and listening to Ikashinju and then I put on a Yes record.
Yeah.
What? Like who the fuck does that? And but they're all,
I love that shit though.
No, totally. And that's the thing is like, you look at the integrity, Humanity's the Devil.
Yeah.
And like one dude's wearing a Wide Awake shirt and the other one's wearing an SDS shirt.
Yeah. Yep.
It's just like, that makes sense. It totally makes sense. It's like the time I saw Integrity with Warzone and Neurosis, it made total sense.
Well, I mean, anytime Neurosis is involved,
yeah,
Neurosis still stand head and shoulders to me above any other hardcore band because they were my favorite when I was 13, and they are now, even though all that shit happened.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, they are our Pink Floyd. I
better or worse, just like Pink Floyd for better or worse.
Just like Pink Floyd for better or worse, with all of the of the shit that went on there too. There's just something about a band that retains the same spirit throughout like 18 different sounds.
Yeah.
That you can tie yourself to, that you follow a journey. I think Krudos had that kind of thing too. And if Martine had decided to continue with it, we'd still be buying Krudos records. I firmly believe that. There's something about Krudos. There's something about Ottawa. Certain bands just encapsulated a moment and a spirit in such a way that it's unflappable. You know what I mean?
Well, I think a lot of those bands is because you make a connection with them, right? Like Krudos was a band that for me it was very important, not just because like I was in this period of time where I was like looking for hardcore records and people were giving me like metal records, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And I finally picked up a Krudos record and I was like, oh, this is a hardcore band finally.
Yeah.
But also just because of that connection to like the community they come from, the ability to, of being not only being a ferocious live band, but being a band that's able to connect with the audience. And I think, like, if you look at a band like Neurosis, like, it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, there's a connection to a community. There's a connection to the audience. There is a, like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, for me, Silver and Blow is the last Neurosis record that I was like actually interested in. But I see the value in what they're doing and the continuing of doing, and the ability for the members of that band to stay not only connected to the community they came from, but also the ability to continue to evolve their sound in a way that stays true to themselves, right? Yeah. And I think that that's the thing is like, and I think that's a lot of people lose sight of that. I think in some ways, like I don't have to like everything, and I don't like what you do, but like, if you're doing it in a way that keeps true, like I see value in it, right? And I think that's what people can connect to, and that's what people can pull from, Like I think, like, poses are easy to spot,
absolutely,
and they're easy to get, and they're easy, and they fool a lot of people, and they're here to like make a buck, but like you can see them if you're really paying attention. Sure. And I think that's the thing is like, with the bands that have that longevity and that long connection are not that. They're the actual people who actually give a shit. And how you can, again, it all goes back to that connection thing. And I think that's what people see in, like, for me, it's like what I see in like a lot of these younger bands, right? Like the younger bands that I find meaning with and I find connection to, even though it's like, like 20 years younger than me.
Yeah.
Like, I still see meaning and value in what you're doing because I find that same connection and that same kind of thread of like, you know.
That's why I don't, you'll never hear me like bemoan Turnstile or bands like that, because sure, Turnstile, do they sound like Snapcase meets 311? Yes, of course they do. How I just don't know how that's really bad, A, and B, if you're doing it really well and still serving the same people who brought you to the fore,
Yeah.
I can't fault you for that. I just can't.
I mean, I think for me, like I saw Turnstile. I've seen Turnstile before Time and Space. I've
Yeah.
seen them after Time and Space. I saw them, and they've always been like, "Oh, it's all right." And then I saw them one time, and it was like transcendent.
Yeah.
Like, I saw them play Great American Music Hall and San Francisco, and it was packed to the gills. And it was right after Time and Space came out, and it was fucking insane. And it was everything, and it was like, oh, this, I get it. Like, this is the moment where I get it. And it reminds. So I had this conversation with Todd Youth like years ago, where I was like, I was talking about like Bad Brains, and I was like, yeah, Bad Brains, I love Bad Brains. And he's like, well, when did you see them? And I was like, I saw them in '89. He was like, you saw okay Bad Brains. And I was like, what? It's like, I'm sorry that I didn't run away from home and live in the Lower East Side and see Bad Brains at 82 or whatever he saw that. And I had the same and I did this recently with another interview. I did an interview with I did an interview with Brooke Smith, and she said the same to me. She was like, yeah, you saw okay Bad.
Yeah, but like, come on, like you saw Bad, but you still saw Bad Brains. Like that's
I
the
saw
point.
Bad Brains, and I think that's the thing is I think with Turnstile it's the same kind of vibe. I think people are going to see Turnstile, and it's going to connect with them in a certain way. Because the thing was, Bad Brains in '89 connected with me,
Yeah.
but they had seen a different version of it, where it's just like I see all Time and Space. That one show I've seen Turnstile, and it hit me, and I was like, boom, that's the moment. And then there's other like they're gonna see other people are gonna see them, and they see them now, and they're like, oh my god. And I'm gonna see them and be like, whatever. You saw okay, you know.
That's and that like I have a little bit of a problem with people who kind of like, it's not gatekeeping, but it's like, you saw them like the lesser version. Like I saw Quickness era Bad Brains. That was the first time, because I'm not 60 years old. I'm only 47 years old, but I got to see the Bad Brains.
Yeah,
Just
Todd would like to point out that he's only 1 year older than me. So it's like, I was like, I'm sorry, I was on tour with fucking, the Beastie Boys when I was 14 or whatever.
Yeah, like you were on tour of Warzone when you were 12, Todd. Like, come on.
Yeah, it's like, what?
But I did get to see Gorilla Biscuits before they broke up. And were they great? Yes. Were they the best band I'd ever seen at that moment? No. That title would probably go to Sick of It All at that point, because they were ferocious and unstoppable at that point.
Yep.
I'm not gonna bemoan them for it. It's just what it was.
No, and I think I agree with you. Like, I agree with you. There is a thing, like, I think I hate the word gatekeeping.
Yeah.
Because I think there needs to be some level of gatekeeping. I always joke that I wish there were skinheads around that would just like intimidate people. But like, I think that there is an aspect of it though, like where you can't. I don't think you should yuck. You don't think you should yuck other people's yum, so to speak, right? Like, to use a phrase that I think I heard on a podcast. It sounds like an old grandma phrase or something. Oh, yum is yum. But I mean, that's the thing though, right? Like, I don't think that you should. If someone finds meaning in something, I don't think you should totally shit on it. I mean, with exceptions to that rule, if I'm bored on the internet, for example. But I think in general, like, yeah, it's like I saw Quick and Sarah Bad Brains. It was fucking outstanding.
Yeah.
And yeah, it probably was different in 1982 or 83 or 84 or whatever. But for me personally, like, it had more meaning when I went versus, and I could say now, like, I saw 94 area Soul Brains.
Yeah.
And that was a disaster. It was like watching a car crash, like.
Yep.
So like I do agree with that, but like I don't, like I can't, and that's the thing where I think about this a lot. Like again, like I see someone who's like 20 years old in a Minor Threat T-shirt, and I'm like, why, like why do you care? Like, I think there's a difference between like, and I do think, because I mean, think about it, like there were, I've now reached a point where Prince has been broken up longer, much longer than Minor Threat had been broken up when I first saw Fugazi.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and it's like, I don't get that, but I do get like kids being into like, exploring stuff, learning the history stuff. And I encourage that. Like, I think it's a good idea, but I would rather see people in my brain, I would rather see people being like more excited about like younger bands,
Yeah.
especially when they're younger. And I think, having those conversations, and but I also do this all the time where in my brain, I forget how young people are because
Yeah.
so much time has passed.
Yeah.
Like I will have conversations with people and just assume I'm like, yeah, like this is a regular thing that happens to me. Oh yeah, I mean, you saw His Hero Is Gone, right?
A million
And
times. Yeah. Yeah.
and I will say that to people, and they'll be like, I was 8 when they broke up, and I'll be like, oh, that's right, because they've been broken up since 1999.
Yeah.
24 years ago. My God, that kind of thing. And so this person who's in their early 30s, and that's, I mean, it's the weird nature of time, I guess. But like, I think about this stuff a lot. Like, but for me, like, it's a big deal to not allow nostalgia to overtake everything.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and that's the big thing. Like, and I think about this a lot. Like, where like I used to make fun of like all these old bands touring and playing shows.
Yeah. Yeah. Nostalgia acts, I used to call them. Used to.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the thing, right? Like, and I say this as someone who's like worked on some re-releases recently, like doing the layouts and like has gone to go see them and like, I'm going to go see Gorilla Biscuit. I'm shooting Gorilla Biscuits tomorrow night. And like, and that was in my brain. I was just like, like I remember Better Than 1,000 playing in Cleveland, and I was doing a See in Red show that night, and I was like, why the fuck would you go see Better Than 1,000? This is the band who is a straight A allegedly, who has written about how they were drinking wine in Italy. Like, where's the fucking meaning of sincerity in this?
Yeah.
And like, why would you go do that versus going to see in Red? Fair point. They've been a band together basically since '86 or whatever it is, whenever Alarm broke up. But like, why? Like, but they've continued. They just did their thing, and they've stayed true to their thing. And like, for me, it's all about like all those bands because it's like you go see Shelter and they play Youth of Today covers. It's like, why? Why are you doing that? Like, why are you always looking backwards? Like, this is a cyclical argument. I don't know if you can tell this is something that goes on in my brain a lot. But
No, I understand fully. Like fully. I mean,
that's always been interesting. Go ahead, sir.
No, you go ahead.
For me, it's been the interesting thing about like all those Discord bands.
Mm-hmm.
The band breaks up. If I go see Hammered Holes, they're not playing Faith songs.
No.
But Alec is the same level of intense performer as I saw Ignition. He did some shit that like my friend was like, that was like seeing Born Against. Like he threw a microphone, picked over a stool, and like went outside while the band was still playing. It was like, oh, that's Sam McPheeter shit. Like, like
Oh, totally.
And like, and the level, and the thing is he has this weird stage presence where he's like so intense. And you're like, oh, that's right. You are the cooler McCallie.
Yeah.
You are the actual hardcore kid as opposed to the guy who like nothing at the end, but like Alec is like he's the fucking guy.
He's the psychopath.
Ian is the guy who's like, oh, you like playing golf? It's just not my thing, man. I'm straight edge. And then like Alec is like, if you defend them, you're no better. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, he was the one that like you had to watch him. He was the one that would probably stab you in the neck if he fucked around. And that was kind of like that was the thing that made the Faith so fucking good. Like,
or even and I would say and the thing is this, what's interesting about faith too is I was thinking about this today, is like the faith led into all that Revolution Summer stuff.
Oh, for
They
sure.
took the initial idea, and if you listen, and it's like the faith, the split void is great.
Yeah.
Everyone's always like, I like the void side better, and I like the void side better, blah, blah, blah.
I like them both the same for different reasons.
If the demo recordings of the faith stuff had come out as their side is split, where it's more raw, it's more primitive sounding, I think people would be like, oh, it's more of a toss up. It wouldn't be like this obvious like thing that most people throw out, right?
Yeah.
But then you look at the faith 12-inch, and that faith 12-inch is like, oh, here's all the ideas for Revolution Summer.
Yep.
Musically.
It's the fucking blueprint.
And then the lyrics. And then you look at like the bands, the Revolution Summer bands, and like you look at Ignition and the level of intensity that is present in Ignition is insane. And then they do a Vibrators cover.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you're actually punk.
Yeah. You're still a punk. You're just
everyone else wants to be Empire. You want to be the fucking Vibrators. I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Totally. I get it. Like, and for me, Ignition is such a band, man. Like I remember Scotty when I was in Inept making fun of me because I was gonna get a tattoo of a Temperance Hardens Me, which is like that. Like he's like, I was like, that's the most strange lyric of all time. And he was like, that's so corny. And I was like, I don't care. I didn't do it, but maybe I will, because that's the thing I've been talking about when I'm not temperate. But I've been talking about as I reach my 50s, like getting all the dumb punk tattoos I ever wanted. So
I fully support that, because there's something about the idea of like carrying these icons of a foregone time that were so transformative to you, that you're not wearing it as like a flag to someone else, like, hey, I'm into this shit. It's not like a shitty Social Distortion tattoo like that I got in the 80s, but you know what I mean? Like it has more to do with something that's been time tested and is very internalized.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not getting a crucified skinhead tattoo. It's about.
Oh, I wanted those too.
I have one on my back. It's a real shitty one too. But
this makes it good. So,
but like
that's what makes it good. It has to be shitty.
It's very shitty. It's very shitty. It's one of my first. Really was transformative. That really does still hold water for you in this rarefied age that we're in, to still be loving and involved in our music culture. It just makes it cooler to me.
I mean, it's interesting because I totally agree with that. I mean, I think that's the thing is like, and I think that's the thing as you get older is like being open to admitting to these things that meant so much to you, and not being as being corny. And I think that's incredibly important, right? And I'll even say like the Social Distortion, like I mean the first Social Distortion LP, 1945 split. I mean it's single. Like not only like musically do I love them, and I actually like Social Distortion like way longer than that, but lyrically that first LP is like fucking genius. It's like because it manifests so many thoughts about being an angry young person, right? Like that fucking song about going to shows and sneaking in the back door and smashing glass bottles because it's fun. Like that to me is appealing. And I think sometimes there's a lot of like, there's a through line, I think, of like in culture in general of like, as you get older, your focus becomes around like surviving, making money, trying to exist in this world, and like, and you're constantly trying to get back to this place that where things were simpler and you're happy, right?
Yeah.
Like I like being like 18, being 21, whatever it is, not having any money, but like, and just but having no anxiety and no stress about the world and feeling all the joy of just existing, right? And I think there's that thing for me, as I get older, is trying to like circle back to that, and find those moments and capture those moments. And I find them in lyrics, I find them in records, and I find that, and I think sometimes there's like, I think part of the reason why I'm so like amped and into like a lot of younger bands is that it's like just vicarious living through them, right? Like I remember sleeping on floors. I remember like, you know, playing shows to 3 people and being the best show I've ever played.
Yep.
I like, and just bringing those moments back in my brain and making those connections around that, you know. So
I think even more so though, to return to a place that maybe wasn't so cushy, maybe wasn't like the simplest time in your life, but finding things that were kind of bell ringers for what life was to become and not bullshitting you about it. I think that's what made like some of those Revolution summer bands really stick out. And the whole like the initial thrust of like New York post-hardcore when Quicksand Slip was a big deal, and like songs like Dine Alone talking about how you'd rather eat by yourself because at least you know no one's gonna fucking stiff you on the bill. It doesn't make it like that at that age. It made sense to me. I was a teenager. I was just like going into college, and it's like, yeah, I simplify my life by not surrounding myself by people who won't fuck me over. It sounds trite now, but at that time, that's very it's very poignant, you know, just reaching a place where you could be okay alone with yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. That's for me. A lot of this stuff is like when you start looking at these bands, like the things that the bands and the songs that mean the most to me is really focused on a lot of stuff it's about those transformative moments. It's about those moments of like, and it can be of like like manifesting and soaking and like dwelling in your own misery, but also your own joy. And it's about like, but also just like, and then like the unadulterated rage and anger, you know, like for me, like that was the thing about like what resonated so much with that, His Hero's Gone. Like the first time I saw His Hero's Gone in Dayton, and this is when Fat Pat was still in the band. And like Cryonic, and like and Anthem for the Undesirables was the first song they played. And he like, and it's a song about just like staring yourself in the mirror and having and like thinking about like the entire world telling you you're ugly your whole life, and then like celebrating it.
Yes. Fuck,
and
I played with them on that tour, and like that first, when they first fucking struck out, like they were legitimately one of the first bands that's like, in my opinion, were like fully and legitimately punk again, because we were in the Victory Records fucking era at this point, right? Like there's no question. And there were good bands on Victory. I loved Bloodlet. I loved Dead Guy. But His Hero Was Gone was the type of band that were just, they were crusty, they were heavy, but they were very like, strip all that away, they were just straight up fucking real punk rock. They were a punk rock fucking band.
For me, like they were like a pure id moment.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I remember the funny thing about it is I remember talking to Todd, and he would be like, and they didn't fit in anywhere.
Reversal Man was the other band I think they fit in with.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I was like, the thing with His Hero's Gone is like, I remember them talking about like them playing in Minneapolis and people getting their shit because they were vegan and straight edge.
Mm-hmm.
And then they play a show with like vegan straight edge bands, and they were too crusty and punk, right? Mm-hmm. And like, and they were just fucking in the level. I just remember that first time I saw them it was before, it was on the demo, and it was before, and it's like when they did that 90-day tour where they were out for 90 days straight, and they were booking the tour from the road as they were going, and they were going out to California to record the first 7-inch and 12-inch, but they were just like I don't know how long they'd been out when I saw them in dating, but like it was just I I didn't know what to expect. And it was like so loud and it was so angry and it was so explosive. And then when you finally heard that record, I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And like it's hard because I have conversations with kids nowadays who are like, oh, like that band, whatever, blah blah blah. I was like, no, you don't understand. Like you didn't see the moment. Like you didn't see the thing in the moment. And it's just insane. And like
I could
I
cry
remember
thinking about
them.
it.
Yeah, it's just like it's crazy to me. And like and so I remember that was the thing. Is like when we saw them, me and a couple of folks in Inept, that was like it was like transformative. Like, oh, that's what we want to do.
Yeah.
That we want to do that. And like, you know, we and then like I mean it's a lot of like it like I've had conversations with them, so it's not super corny to say it, like about like like how transformative that band was, and then also just as those people through their friendship, right? Like this notion, and like it was funny because because I continued to I like taped with those dudes,
Yeah.
you know. They were like, "Oh, have you heard this? Have you heard that? Have you heard this?" Like the reason why like a lot of that Japanese stuff I got into, like a lot of like heavy into like Burning Spirit stuff in the like mid like '90s, was because they were like, "Oh, have you heard Balance? Have you heard like Mustang? Have you heard well, like here's a tape?" You know, we'd stay with them and all that kind of stuff, and like just listen to records and stuff. And it was just wild. Like
Those
it
dudes
was just
turned me
like
on to Balzac. Do you remember, like,
yeah.
who later were like associated with the Misfits? But
With the Misfits, yeah. No, I love. I mean, you know, I love all.
but those
All the
guys,
fellas,
that's who turned
all
me
the
on to Balzac.
bigger band. Yeah. No, I mean, that was the thing is I remember because they were like, and they were just like dudes from like Memphis, you
Mm.
know, like
Yeah.
that was, I remember like you know, um, and I ended up being tight with a lot of people in Memphis. I mean that's why I, you know, like ended up meeting like people from Lucero and stuff. Like we're just a whole different world these days, but you know,
Yeah, but I mean,
yeah,
it's funny how all of that ties into us too. But like in the same token, like I think of, you know, the name of your zine, like I immediately think of Leatherface, right?
yeah,
Like Razorblades
I
and
love Memphis.
Aspirin. Yeah, Leatherface, you know, Leatherface.
Yeah,
I remember being in high school and hearing Cherry Knoll.
yeah,
You know, most people who were younger than us, probably if they know Leatherface, know them from their association with No Idea Records or a split they
hot
did
water.
on BYO with Hot Water Music, right?
Yeah,
I know them because of Cherry Knoll. I know them because they had a moment very briefly when Cherry Knoll came out where they were on BMG Records. And
yeah,
if you had been scamming the BMG Music Club, as I had been at that time period,
yeah,
you could get Cherry Knoll for 5 cents or go search for it forever. So I got it for 5 cents scamming BMG. And like hearing Frankie Stubbs fucking like growl for the first time.
yeah.
Wow. Like, holy fucking shit. Are you kidding me? Like, are you kidding me?
It's
This guy is he's Walt Whitman and he's Charles Bukowski in the same human.
yeah. I mean, it's wild to me because like Fill Your Boots for me, like Fill Your Boots and Mush, like are like the that's like my musical taste married,
Yeah.
right? It's like my joke has always been that like Husker Du is Discharge meets the Birds,
Yeah.
and and then like, but then like Leatherface takes that up a notch, right? Like it's like this, as you're saying, like this poetic lyrics,
Yeah.
um, you know, gruff like Lemmy style vocals, like super aggressive because they came out of that world, right? Like Dickie was in like generic with like Sned, you know, from who is in the Doom and like selfish and not selfish. I'm sorry. He was in Health Hazard and all those kind of bands, but like and Suffer. I was thinking not Suffer,
Yeah.
but like like they take it up such a level, and it's so aggressive. It's like fucking double bass on like Mush and Fill Your Boots and Cherry Knoll. Like, like it's just like, and it's so aggressive, but it's so musical, and it's so like there's bands in my brain that like manifest the sound of the city they're from, right? Like, or the area they're from, and like that dour North England post-industrial, like that's Leatherface. Like,
Yeah.
everything is shit, but let's go to the pub and have a pint.
Yep.
And it's just like, it's kind of the Wipers manifest for me, like Portland, like perfectly. It's like it's like I'm depressed and I'm a nerd and I'm obsessed with aliens or whatever, but like that kind of thing, right? But like Leatherface just sounds like a thing, and and especially, and I like the latest Leatherface. Like I think that there's good songs on every record they released.
I agree.
And I think, but as complete records, those first three are
up to Minx.
Perfect. I would say Knoll, Fill Your Boots, and Mush. And I think Minx is good, and I think the last is good, but not the same level. I think Cherry Knoll, Fill Your Boots, and Mush is the equivalent of like Bad Religion, Suffer, No Control, and Against the Grain.
You're not.
Like,
you're not fucking wrong. You're not fucking wrong.
Like, it's just like no bad tracks. Like, no reason. Like, the only reason why you're skipping it over is because you're like, oh, I like this one more than the other one. But like, yeah,
nothing sucks.
Like, yeah, and it's like but it's like a juggernaut. And like, you watch videos from that era, like early '90s era and stuff like that, and they're just like insane. And it's like, and the guitar work on those records is like, you assume it's Dickie playing because he's not singing, but it's like it's Frankie playing it.
It's Frankie, yeah.
It's Frankie playing his part, and he's like singing over it. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? How do you do that?
Frankie Stubbs is one of the unsung fucking heroes of punk rock. People need to understand how important this fucking guy was.
Yeah, it's crazy, but I think Dickie's guitar work, and it's like, is absolutely insane as well, because you think about like HDQ, like the pre-band, and like you can see all this stuff. Like, I was talking to someone who's like a young kid here who's like starting in Leatherface stuff, and I was like, oh well, all the HDQ stuff's on Spotify. Like, you should listen to that, and like all like this proto Leatherface style guitar work and song structure, but it's not as evolved as the Leatherface stuff, because I think that's what you need, is these two people that kind of can like get together and do the thing, right? And like, it's just, it's insane. And like, I am forever thankful the Hot Water Music brought them to the States so I could see them.
Yeah.
And that they, I mean, that's one of the early conversations I ever had with like Chuck, was like about Leatherface.
Chuck, Chuck's a beautiful human, but boy, does he love Frankie Stubbs.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is they played some show in Columbus, and I made some offhand joke about how they were a secondhand Leatherface, and he was like, yo.
Yeah, well, I mean, Chuck's not a bullshit artist. I can tell you that with a great degree of certainty. I've known Chuck Reagan since the 90s. He doesn't mince words, and he doesn't bullshit. And yeah, if you said that in front of him, I could see him saying, well, yeah, I mean, what the fuck?
Yeah, of course. That was the thing, right? So like, but the time I got to see them was they played this show in Cleveland. It was like them and Leatherface. It was like Hot Water, Leatherface, Dillinger Poor, and Night Shock's Terror.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, I think it was part of some dumb fest, but that was like the show, the afternoon show or something like that. And it was just like insane, just insane. And it's like all these people from Toronto came down, and they all knew the lyrics, and like Ward, who ended up doing Deranged, and like Simon, who did what was Simon's label? He like put out like Paintbox and Warhead and stuff. But Simon?
I not personally, but it's striking a chord, because I think what the fuck's the name of the label?
He released Singing, Shouting, Crying, and it was released on Ugly Pop. Boom. That's what it is.
Oh, that's what it is. That's what it is. Okay.
which of course ties back to the previous conversation around integrity.
Yeah.
Because one time I saw one Skolnick smack the shit out of because the pre-Ugly Pop, or maybe it was Ugly Pop, was supposed to do that negative approach comp, and they did reproach, and it took too long to come out.
And I almost said Toy Box Records, which was also an integrity label. Like integrity was on Toy Box as well.
Sean's Toy Box. Yeah.
Yeah.
He did the first college.
Yep.
The best version, in my opinion.
I agree.
Because it was like the prettiest packaging, and it came with a poster and all that kind of stuff. But no. But all those Toronto dudes came down, and I remember that distinctly. And and they knew all the lyrics.
So, but like bearing all this in mind, all of your history too in playing music, was there a point where you were just like, all right, I'm just done with the music end of this. I'll just do a zine or what have you? Like, was there a definitive point where you were like, you know what, I don't know if I could continue to play the music?
No,
because I'm still there. I'm still making music. I'm still playing in bands, but it's so sporadic, and I'll play a show here or there, but I can't really I'd rather do a podcast at this point because I'm almost 50 and I have a 4-year-old. I hit the family reset button, so it's like I'd rather be home with my baby than make music. Was there that?
I did. Yeah, no, I did bands pretty consistently about 2006, and then I did a band. The last band I did that did anything, we didn't do anything. We did a demo. It's called War All the Time, and it was like me and some folks from Look Back and Laugh, and Devin, who sang for What Happens Next. And it was like one of those things where we just didn't practice anymore. It's like we played a show, and then I took my amp home, and then we didn't get around. And it just kind of fizzled out. And then I think in 2006, I just kind of started focusing on I think I had a moment where I was like, I'm 32. I should probably get a job of some sort, like a job. And so I started doing that kind of stuff pretty heavy. Still going to shows, just being a guy who's hanging out and going to shows and doing whatever. And so that was when I stopped playing music. And then it's actually funny because I just started a new band a few weeks ago. So I'm doing it now, right?
Yeah.
And but it was never a conscious decision.
It just happened.
It just happened. And I think I would talk to people. There was a period of time where I was Brett, who was played drums for Rancid, and I were talking about doing something.
Yeah.
And then there was a period of time where my friend Sam, who is in KO Dot, and I were talking about doing something together.
Love KO Dot so much. I love KO Dot.
And we were, so there was these ideas, and it was I'll do it. Maybe, I don't know, it was a priority, I think, more than anything else. And I actually stopped doing anything. And I think I was taking pictures occasionally at shows, and then 2016 is when I started doing the zine. And I'd been taking pictures for a bit, and I was just I want to do a thing because I still care about a thing. And I've always taken that first, and inside the first Big Boys records, there's that chart and how to do 3 different chords. And it's now go start your own band. And they would have that thing. It was what are you doing to participate? And that always kind of resonated with me. And I think that's everything we've been kind of feeling about, kind of, it's obvious. And I think for me, I was I'll just do a zine of my photos, right? And I did that. I did 50 of them, and I sold through them pretty quickly. And then I did another one and another one. And I was really interested in just doing photo zines for a while. And I think the first, trying to do the math. Okay, so the first 7 it's weird because I did all these like, because I'm an idiot. I did things like, oh, here's issue 4.5. Here's issue 4.75. So the first, my numbers up to issue 7 is the number of photo scenes I did, but it was actually like 9. and so I did that, and they were all photo zines except for the last one, number 7, was if I did interviews, and I did record write-ups. And so I interviewed Daniel, who sings for Negative, and does Biotest, or however you say it in Norwegian, distribution. I interviewed him, and then I did a write-up of my favorite records. And I liked doing that. And then I did another half-ish. And then with issue 8 was my first like full-blown, like, I'm doing a fanzine again.
Yeah.
And the idea behind Razorblades and Aspirin initially, when I decided to do it as a fanzine, is I wanted to make it like, I've done the newsprint thing, I've done the photocopy thing, and I've done the pure black and white zine thing. And I was like, I'm going to do an art magazine. So I'm going to do the zine that looks like, like my partner Amanda was a commercial photography. She has a degree in photography. Like, and my idea was like to do something that looked like the magazines that she would buy for like $30 at the special magazine store. And that was my idea initially with Razorblades. I want to do a fancy art magazine for bands that play to 50 people in the basement. And I wanted to like enter, and there was like so many photographers that, kind of, that I wanted to kind of feature them. And that was the initial idea about it. And so I've now done all the half issues. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea. As official zines, I've done 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So am I on 15 or 16? 15. And so I've done 8 of those. And then there's a bunch of half issues that are like, I've done like little half issues that are like 5x7 perfect bounds. They're just like photo zines. I've done newsprint, like poster size things, because I like the size capability of that.
Oh, they all, the newsprint ones look so fucking good. Like I mentioned to you in my email, like your newsprint issues were gorgeous. Like it came off so well. Like the art direction, it just popped. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's like I wanted to be like. That's the other thing too. Is I didn't want it to look like a fucking somebody trying to do a cut and paste zine.
Yeah,
that's not where I'm at. Like I want to do like shit that looks like art shit. Like I'm putting it. Right,
but it came off, and it didn't seem like somebody trying to do an art zine that wasn't informed. Somebody who is just a try-hard who was failing miserably. It came off, and it always comes off. There's like the aesthetic of your zine is there's not one set aesthetic. It just always comes off really well. And that's important. You know what I mean? To continually put forth something that has quality. It doesn't have to have a unity of vision.
Yeah.
So long as it is uniformly really well done. And I think that like that's the lesson we can learn from like bands like PIL or magazines like Legends out of New York, who they never really did the same thing twice, but it was always really good. If you're putting the same amount of passion in every iteration of the same thing, it's still that thing. And that's fucking punk rock, man.
Yeah.
Truly.
I mean, the thing for me, and I thank you for that. Like, I think for me, like my goal is to like, I want to do something that looks really good, and I want it to be like like a passion project. And then the other thing is like, I want something that is going to be it's a challenge for me to make it interesting. Right. And that was the initial idea about doing color, like full color, like the notion of like, for a lot of, I mean, most people think of it, they're like, well, punk rock photography is in black and white and statement. That's what most people think of it, right?
Yeah, full
And you
stop.
feel
Yeah.
people, yeah. And it's like funny because you'll see these like Instagram accounts of like punk rock photographers where, "Motherfucker, I know you're shooting this with like a full like a camera that's capable, like a digital camera, like, and you're shooting raw, like doesn't have to be black and white, it can be whatever you want it to be."
Yeah.
And so like in my brain, I was like, I want to do something that conveys the energy and like the feel of the thing that I see in person, and I want to do it in color. And so that was the initial idea about it. And what's funny about it is right now is the next issue that I'm working on, I was like, I want to do black and white because it's this challenge. Because now color is easy to me. Now color is easy to me. Now color is like the thing of like, oh well, I can make color zines like all day long, and it's easy, and it's just, and if I'm strapped for like making something interesting, I just go in like a blue bar or whatever. And now I want to do the opposite, where I'm just like, from a design perspective, like, well, how can I make black and white interesting?
Well,
Like, how can I convey the same feeling?
yeah, because like we have examples of both, kind of, right? Like you think Edward Culver, you think really beautiful black and whites.
Yeah.
But if you think of someone like BJ Pappas, they're full colors of New York hardcore bands going crazy. So like we know kind of like the diaspora of punk rock photography. But like to bring it back to its essence in a way that's honest would be a lot of fun, I would think. So for you to, like, you've done this, I've done the full color thing, and you've done it in many different formats too, nonetheless, like newsprint, kind of return to the essence of the form is refreshing because we're not seeing that anymore. No one's doing that anymore, really. That was de rigueur 30 years ago, not now.
I mean, that's the thing. It's for me, it's like with a lot of this stuff, just in general, it's like the reason why I do my zine is like I want it to be a challenge for me. Like I want to do it for me. Like, and it's a thing where like, a lot of it too is like, but yeah, I want to be able to go like doing it in black and white is like, yeah, it's more of a challenge for me. It's more interesting for me in this moment. And that may change the issue, like it may change next issue I'm trying to find a printer who can do 11 by 14 full color magazine and not just not newsprint, right? Yeah. Like it's like what is the challenge and what does it makes it interesting to me, and as long as they break even on it, like financially, that's all I care about. Like people are always like, how do you sell this for so cheap? And I was like, well, I'm not concerned with making money on it. Like this is just for me. Like, and literally at the end of the day, like me doing the zine is just for me. Like,
and last time I checked, I don't remember an issue that didn't sell out.
No, they don't. They always sell out.
They always sell out, and that's I think that's important to note. Just not just from an aesthetic point of view, but from a cultural point of view, because if you're doing something that is like inherently and from a point of austerity very punk rock, for it to still you're not getting rich off this, we all know it, but the fact that like your print runs are constantly exhausted issue by issue, that means there's a quality to what you're doing, and the fact that you put a limit on it, that it's not this unlimited thing like you put on the internet and it's there fucking forever. No, this is tactile. You can hold it. This is real, and it's gonna run out. So either get it or don't. But if you get it, you have it. You're in the know. If you don't get it, you're shit out of luck, man. There's a quality to that someone of our shared generation sees the value in. And I think that's still
Yeah.
important. I think that's still important to these new hardcore kids who are still buying vinyl and cassettes and still investing in tactile experiences in music, which is inherently ethereal.
Yeah.
I put a lot of value into that, and
Yeah.
that's why I love what you do.
Yeah. I think, no, I mean, it is a thing. Like it sells out, and it sells out way too fast.
Yeah,
For
it
my,
does. It does.
like,
If VAR didn't
like,
get me my copies every time, I wouldn't get one.
yeah. And that's the thing is like, I wish I had, there's part of me which, like, I wish I had the financial wherewithal to be able to print more copies. But I'm also like, this is my own undoing. I think sometimes I'm hung up on like 90s style economics about things. Like,
Yeah.
I could probably charge more for advertising, probably charge more for copies, but like, I don't know. I just feel weird. Like, it's already weird enough that a magazine costs $10 to me,
Yeah.
right, or whatever. Like, that's how much it is for me directly. But like, and I see other zines that come out these days, fewer pages, smaller print run, $15-$20.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
We
and I don't know.
paid what did we pay for zines back in the day?
Well, you get
75 cents to $1?
50 cents, and then maximum was $3.
Yeah, maximum was $3 on newsprint.
Yeah, so like it's one of those things, and it's also think like the last newsprint issue I basically took the money that I made off of issue 15, which is about $500, and I turned around and printed 500 copies of what is issue 15.5.
Yeah,
and then just gave most of the print run to Revelation and Sorry Straight just to give away.
Yeah,
because I'm just like, okay, well, and I had some here that you get from me, and I was like, it's $5 because that includes the shipping, and if you want to ensure that you get a copy, otherwise you have to go to these places. And I've talked to those guys, and one thing I talk about doing is like doing a print run of like newspaper, like a 12-page or a 16-page newspaper. That is like, we do like 3,000 of them because like they're both like, we can get rid of 1,000 of these pretty easily.
yeah.
And I was like, okay, just give it away. Like it's easy just to include it in orders, which for me is like, that's how we promoted like more of the music fest. We just did like piles of flyers, these record distros, and they send them out in orders, And
Sure.
so like in my brain, I'm just like, I'll just do this in the zine. It's like a loss leader in some ways, but like I'm thinking from like my professional life, but like but at the same time, it's a way to transmit information, and I think part of the reason why I do the zine, besides my own edification of like interest in photography, wanting to do like a cool like art project thing, but I write about records, and I write about like bands I care about, and I want that information to get out there, even if these bands have a PR person in some cases, right? And there's
Sure.
and I see all the PR emails, and I was like, Scal stayed with me. I got one, and I was reading it to them to make fun of them, but like like that kind of thing. I think that's just corny, but there's also like a lot of stuff I read about like doesn't get cut. Like Bootlicker, I think, is a great band, but like they don't get heavy coverage, or like Mess is a great band, but they don't get like heavy coverage because they don't have a PR person, like that kind of thing. So, and and then even just the records, like people are all the time like, what does it take to get you to write something about my record? And I was like, I like it. And then I'm like, anything else? I was like, well, if it's shit, I won't write about it because I don't want to talk shit about you. Like, he was confused by that. So I remember talking to Ruth at Mordam years ago, and like, she's like, there's a reason why we ship, however many hundreds of thousands Operation Ivy records.
Yeah.
It's like you send out one sheet, you send out this, you send out that, and you push it. And the point of it, and I think this has always been the thing that people never got about like the MRR anti-major label thing. It wasn't about like DIY is you do it because you do it better than them.
Yeah.
And you do it because you love the thing, right? Like
yeah.
you do, and this is, and it's not because you don't want to make money. Like you want these bands to be successful. You want these zines to be successful. You want this stuff because you believe in this thing, and you want to do it outside the context of the bullshit that they feed you, so to speak.
The machine. Yeah, we're our own thing.
I mean, how many fucking records did Fugazi sell? You know,
a fucking lot, probably. But
yeah, and like how many records did like like Jesus Lizard sell on Touch and Go? Like those are handshake deals. I mean, Fugazi is his own label, but like Jesus Lizard, that's a handshake deal. Like Negative Approach still releasing records on Touch and Go is a handshake deal. Like there's different ways you can do this, and you can structure arrangements, and it's a thing. It's the thing that people miss, right? Like you don't have to fuck people over to survive. You don't have to get fucked. Like there's a way you can do this. You can be successful, and you can challenge the way the music industry works. And I think that's what's important by someone like what Tim does as far as being a publicist. He's a fan.
Sure.
He's doing the thing because he loves the thing.
Yeah.
And he wants these things to be successful and people to hear these things. And I think that gets missed a lot, right?
It does. Yeah.
Like, and I think, but at the same time, you look at how some of these bands approach this stuff, or how some of the artists approach this stuff. Like Fugazi famously wouldn't do an interview with a magazine if it took major label art advertisements, right?
Yeah.
That was their whole thing.
Yeah.
Like they would not do an interview with Spin, and part of the reason why they did that thing is because they were pushing the value of like our thing, right? Like our culture is more important. And if by Fugazi doing an interview with a smaller zine helps push their status more and become visible, then that's a better thing than just going with like, I'm going to do something Rolling Stone, right?
Yeah.
And that choosing the path of most resistance, it goes back to the thing. It's like it's more interesting to me.
Of course.
You could sign with a label, you can do all the things, and like you could take all their money, but it's not like, where's the fucking challenge and fun in that? Like, and where and a label owns, like you get in these agreements with these majors, and they own not only the band you're currently in, but the next 3 projects you're going to do. Where's the fun in that?
As much as I love Quicksand and Walter Schreifels and his legacy, Def Jam still owned his ass, from Slip to Manic Compression to the first Rival Schools record right behind me. There's was his art incredible? Yes. Was he owned and operated? Sadly, yes. That didn't happen to Ian MacKaye. That didn't happen to Alec MacKaye. That didn't happen to the Jesus Lizard. Even when the Jesus Lizard did find their way to a major label, they were still writing their own fucking ticket, right?
Right, because their agreement was like, you pay us $1 million, we'll do 1 record.
Yeah. And like, hats off to them for that. Same thing with the Swans. The Swans had a major label record that was inarguably their worst outing. Still incredible, but they torpedoed their own record label, and it was beautiful and it was fun to watch, and I loved watching it happen.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, and that's the thing. For me, what was always important and interesting about hardcore is like that it's fun.
Yeah.
Or punk or whatever you want to call it. Like it's doing the things you shouldn't do because you can get away with it. Like, and I think that especially in this day and age, I'm like, what's the point? Like, because I think about like especially like when you think about like the fact that like you see like some of these bands these days like kind of going for that thing, and it was like, but you turn around and look at like if Taylor Swift is telling you it's a bad idea, and she's rich as shit, maybe it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
To like let yourself be owned by other people. Like let your art be owned by other people. Like I think about like someone like Jason Isbell, who's like, he is like absolutely not. He's like, oh, you want me to talk to the head of Southeastern Records? Let me spin around this chair real quick and I'll let him talk to you. It's the same for the person, like that kind of thing. Where it's like, and he has like all the success in the world, and I think that's the thing that frustrates me sometimes about the modern era is like, you look at someone like Triple B, that dude's doing the thing.
Yeah.
It's all him all the time. You look at Scotty Tank Crimes, it's all him all the time.
Yep.
And it's because they're doing all the stuff, they're getting all the placement that you need to get, blah 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 blah. But they're doing it in such a manner where like they're not giving up any of the control. And if you talk to the people, like for example in Necrot, like the people in Necrot, if given the opportunity, they'll do every record on Scotty on Tank Crimes.
Yeah.
With Scotty, and it's like they're breaking Billboard 200 as a metal record. It's like, so again, it's like, what's the point? You want to play? To me, the formula to get to play to 500 people a night, 1,000 people a night, whatever it is, it's the same as it's always been. Get your fucking butt in a van and build your audience. Gel can go out and play 300 cap, 400 cap rooms a night now. It's because they spent all those nights playing to 20 people. Turnstile is playing to how many fucking people they play to nowadays? Like several thousand, probably, because they were playing to 50 people at one point. Orange band, like Code Orange, the same deal. Code Orange went out and they played to 50 people, and they built that shit slowly. But you have to be out there. You play 60, 90, 100 nights a year.
I watched Kill the Priest / Lamb of God do it. I watched Mastodon do it. The first time I saw Mastodon, they played to 5 people, and they set up in the middle of the room because nobody showed up. And say what you want about Mastodon, but they had a blast doing it. They set up in the middle of all of us, and they had fun, and it was beautiful. The band that will embrace that moment and just be like, okay, there's 5 of you. Let's all do this show fucking together, guys. I'm going to root for them no matter if I like the record or not. I respect you. You're part of this. You're from this. If you're just ingratiating yourself into a moment without pretense, I'm going to root for you 1,000,000% of the time, every time. Even if you're playing, if you're Lady Gaga, if you're Slayer, it doesn't matter. It's the spirit, and that's what makes us us. Truly.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I agree, but there is an aspect for me where like I don't want to be used as a stepping stone. I think that the way to get your band popular is you go out and you just play. You fucking creepy crawl across the United States. You don't do this thing where you just fly from here to there. But like at the same time, I'm more interested in bands that this is not a step to completely remove themselves from this, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm interested in this is what's appealing to Turnstile. Like I disagree with them, whatever labels and decisions, economics, whatever, blah blah blah. But the thing that's appealing to me about them is they haven't lost touch with the community that created them. That was always the thing about like the minute the Clash broke down as a band, it's they lost touch with the community that created them.
Yeah.
Right. Like they moved away from that. And I think that's always been and beyond just from like I don't want to be used as your stepping stone and become a famous person and shit all over everything you came from. But even beyond that thing, it's also like I feel like when bands do that, they lose what made them special. Because I don't think most fans know what makes them special or what makes them interesting. And then they get big and they're like, let's try to just recreate that thing. And it's like, well, you never actually understood what was good about your band.
Yeah.
People don't know that. And for most people, there are people who do know what it is, but like for most people, you know, and I think going back to like talking about Neurosis, like that's a band who like, despite all the shit, like when we're gonna go on the Ozfest or whatever, like they still had that connection to the community they came from, right? Like they still maintain that thing. And I think for me, that's what's interesting. That's what's I want to be a part of. That's what I want to be, where you're constantly lifting up the thing that came before you, and the thing, and then the things that come after you, right? Like it's this, it's creating an alternative. I mean, and, you know, it was called More Than Music Fest because I believe it is more than just music, and like I think that it's great as culture, creating and creating like an alternative to the mainstream way of doing things, right? And that's where I kind of hedge myself around, like we are talking about like publicists and stuff like that, where I was like, well, on the one hand, I get it. On the other hand, I was like, you know, I'm inundated with fucking publicist emails. And then I go and I get publicist emails, and then I go online and I look at like sites, and like if the exact same thing was in the publicist email, you know, with maybe like a few verbs changed or something, like, or a few adjectives changed, like, well, what are you doing? Like, and so I don't know. For me, it's like I you know, but again, you know, you look at some of these bands and they're fucking working it, and that's how you get big. You don't get big by just sitting at home and posting on the internet. And that's the thing, is I feel like there was a sizable chunk of time where I feel like bands weren't doing that as much. And I think now there's been more bands that are doing that. And like, I mean, again, there is an aspect of it. I look at Gel. Gel can go on tour for however many months they're going to go on tour this year. But then there's a return on that. Like they're playing, you know, 300-400 people a night. They're, you know, the pre-orders for their LP was what, like 2,500 copies or something. You know, like you're doing the thing, and that's more in line with what like Black Flag was doing when they were creepy crawling across the U.S. Than like, you know, bands being like, well, I put on a 7-inch and I flew to New York. Why don't people like it?
That brings me to kind of like the back end of my questionnaire. You know, there's I think we all reach a point, like as creatives, where we kind of reach that entropy where it's like, okay, this is my last stand. I don't feel like what you did with your fanzine is your last stand. I feel like it was a very natural, it's not like there was an urgency or a last ditch effort in what you were doing. It just seemed like, okay, this is the time for this. You weren't like, I'm doing this or it's bust. It just happened like very naturally. This is the next move. Because you're still doing music. You're still involved. There's no there's nothing that's saying I'm putting the brakes on this. This is the end of the road. I don't think there is an end of the road for people like us, is there?
It's like this is something that's been like legit 30, what is it, 36 years or whatever it is, 37 years of my life. The majority of my life has been doing things involving this, right? And there's going to be periods of and I feel like there's going to be periods of times when I'm doing less, and periods like now where I'm doing more. And it's really like, it's that lifer thing in some ways, you know, like where it's like, it's because it's part of like what makes up you as a person. Like my musical taste like extends beyond just like hardcore punk. Like I like all this other stuff, right? But the thing that actually moves me, and the thing that I talk about, and the things I want to put effort into is this thing, right? Yeah, I mean, it is like you're saying though. It's like for me, it's a thing of like, you go from, you know, I'm doing bands, I'm doing this, and like, you know, I started taking pictures because I enjoyed photography, and like, and then it was like, I'm gonna take photos. And initially I was gonna take photos just to document what I was seeing, and then it was like, well, maybe I want to release these photos in some capacity, and that's how the zine gets going. And then I do this and I do the other thing, and snowballs.
But to me, it's not just an interest in punk rock. It's an interest in people, and almost not almost. It's a sociological and personal interest in other people. That's very honest, and it's easily come by. And I think that's what I appreciate most about what you've constantly done here. You're allowing people into your experience, and there's no limits, there's no lines. It's just, I'm interested. Let's see what you've got, everybody. And I think that cuts through, and I think that's very plain. So I applaud you for that. And to go, like, you're yawning. We're old men. We've been at this for a while, and I could go with you all night, but I don't want to fuck your whole night up. I do want to ask, because it is kind of like the thrust and impetus to the entirety of this podcast, is asking people of our ilk, of our time period, what is it that terrifies you on an existential level?
I think, honestly, there's a couple things, but like, I think I've always been terrified of losing my hearing.
That's a big one.
And because of the fact of what has been a primary driver of my interest in life, right? Like, and so like, if I couldn't hear music, like, I think I'm terrified of that notion. I'm also, so there's like that. It's like a big one for me. And I think the other thing is just like, I think in a larger sense, it's like going to a show and not feeling a connection anymore.
Yeah.
And not feeling like, and I have those moments where I've been to places where I'm just like, why am I here? You know, and not like I went to something that I knew I wasn't going to. Like I once, I saw Texas the Reason to Promise Ring once, and I was on this because it was a date, and I was like, why am I here? I was like, and I started heckling him, and the date didn't go over well because she really loved them, and I was like, I was going to heckle the shit. At those ends, that was my old band. Yeah, I know it ruled. This sucks. Oh, this date just ended. But more so like where I'm at a show where like supposedly like on paper it looks like this is something I'd be into.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of like bored, right? And I have those moments. Like I have those moments now where I'm just like, I'm at a show and I was like, why am I here? But not really, not in the way that would be actually like cause that existential crisis moment, right? But so I think that really is the thing where I suddenly feel like this isn't my thing anymore, and what is my new thing, right? Like where the things that are new no longer inspire me and no longer fill me with joy or drive me or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the real. I think one thing that I'm doing is making fun of people who are just soaked in nostalgia. So if I ever became that person who's just soaked in nostalgia versus like wanting to know about the new thing, I think that would be that kind of fits in that, where I was like,
I can't wait to hear what you do with this new band. And, when the next record or whatever comes out, I hope we can get together again and talk about it and, coalesce on the finer points of what it is you're creating.
Thanks. No, I think that'd be fun, and I appreciate it. And I mean this sincerely. Like, as someone who's not good at taking compliments, I really thanks for that. So.
Listen, I'm not good at taking compliments either, so I get it. But we're from that same thing, right? Where we're not special. Yeah. And, we were probably raised in the same kind of era and area where there's that lower to middle class thing where, we weren't praised for what we did well. We were just kind of expected to toe the line, and that's what it was. But, we deserve whatever accolades we get because we bled for it, man.
Yeah.
So I want you to
I agree.
recognize that, because consistently and constantly done fucking matters.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, no, I really do appreciate it. I think a lot of times you don't hear that a lot.
Yeah.
And you just do the thing, right?
Maybe our dads were not loving enough, or our moms were not loving enough,
Yep.
or didn't offer to us, like, you know, like what you do matters, what you think and say matters. But you know, we did have that maybe our parents or our families didn't give us, was that family that we chose, and hardcore and punk that were like, dude, you fucking matter.
Yeah.
And you made it to like the edge of that, like working for Maximum Rock and Roll and playing in all the fucking amazing bands you played in, and you mattered to me, man.
No, thank you.
Brother to brother, you mattered to me.
Well, thank you very much.
So that being said, I will let you go for the evening, but the next thing comes down the pike, please reach out to me. Find me.
Let you know.
Let me know.
Okay, I will do. Thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun.
It's awesome. Thank you, man.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.
Cheers.
There you have it, folks. My discussion with Mike Thorn. I had a great time. I really enjoy everything he does. All of his output, I think, is phenomenal. Well worth your time. And I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. He's been Michael. I've been Peter. You've been beautiful. And this has been the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. Take care, everybody. Have a great night.